Brace yourselves, Africa, for Donald Trump has just dropped a nuclear bomb on our dignity, and it's dressed up as a $15,000 visa bond. In a move that screams neo-colonial contempt, the US State Department, under Trump's iron fist, has declared that citizens of Malawi and Zambia must fork over a staggering $15,000 deposit just to dream of a tourist or business visa to America. This isn't policy, it's extortion, a financial lynching of African aspirations. 7 months into his second term, Trump's war on Africa is escalating, with visa bans, crippling tariffs and aid cuts designed to choke our economies and humiliate our people. The message is clear. Africa is unwelcome unless it kneels. But this is more than a slap in the face. It's a blaring alarm for our corrupt West-worshipping leaders who've left us vulnerable to such insults. As Trump dangles the threat of a continent-wide ban, heroes like Burkina Faso's Ibrahim Traoré show us the path to defiance. It's time to tear down our colonial borders, unite under one African visa, and tell the world, Africa will not be bullied. On August 5, 2025, the US's State Department announced a policy that has sent shockwaves across Africa. Starting August 20th, citizens of Malawi and Zambia must pay a refundable bond of up to $15,000 for B1, B2 tourist or business visas. This deposit, ostensibly to deter visa overstays, is a cruel mockery of economic realities in these nations. In Malawi, where the per capita GDP is a paltry $557, and in Zambia, where it's $1,300, $15,000 is a fortune, decades of income for most citizens. This isn't a bond, it's a ban, a deliberate barrier to exclude ordinary Africans from lawful travel while milking their desperation for profit. The US justifies this by pointing to overstay rates, 14.3% for Malawi and 11.1% for Zambia in 2023, according to State Department data. But let's call it what it is, a racist, classist policy that paints Africans as potential lawbreakers. The bond's refundable nature is a hollow promise when most cannot afford it up front, and the risk of forfeiture for minor infractions, like applying for asylum, adds a predatory twist. Imagine a teacher in Lilongwe or a small business owner in Lusaka scraping together with $1,000, only to lose it if the US deems their travel non-compliant. This is legalized theft, a scheme to profit from Africa's dreams while slamming the door in our faces. Worse, this is just the beginning. The State Department has hinted at expanding the bond to other African nations with high overstay rates, a vague criterion that could ensnare half the continent. Posts on social media are ablaze with outrage, with users like Afro-Optimist calling it a modern-day poll tax on African mobility. Another, Z Voice, warned, today it's Malawi and Zambia, tomorrow it's Nigeria, Ghana and Kenya. Trump's endgame is a total African ban. The visa bond is the latest in a string of assaults since Trump's return to power on January 20th, 2025. His America First doctrine has turned Africa into a punching bag with policies that undermine our sovereignty, economy and dignity. Here's a timeline of his anti-African moves. First is tariffs on African exports. Trump's trade war has not spared Africa. On July 31st, 2025, he imposed a 15% import tariff on Nigeria, Ghana, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Uganda, and others, with South Africa and Libya facing 30% and 25% tariffs, respectively. These tariffs threaten the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, set to expire in September 2025, which grants duty-free access to US markets for 1,800 products from eligible African countries. South Africa's eligibility is under scrutiny due to its ties with China and Russia, raising fears that AGOA's renewal could be weaponized to exclude nations that don't align with US interests. Another one is expanded travel bans. Trump's immigration crackdown has hit Africa hardest. In June 2025, a leaked memo signed by Secretary of State Marco Rubio revealed plans to expand travel bans to 36 countries, 26 of which are African, including Angola, Benin, Burkina Faso, Cameroon, Côte d'Ivoire, DRC, Ethiopia, Nigeria, and more. This follows an earlier ban on 7 African countries, Somalia, Libya, Sudan and others, among 12 nations deemed uncooperative in deportation enforcement or security vetting. These bans, justified as national security measures, paint Africa as a monolith of risk, ignoring the diversity of our nations and the contributions of African diaspora communities. The memo's timing, just before a planned US-Africa leaders summit, suggests a coercive tactic to force compliance on issues like deportation and trade. Another one is dismantling of USAID. Trump's mission to downsize the federal government led to the gutting of the US Agency for International Development, USAID, which spent 40% of its budget on sub-Saharan Africa. An executive order froze foreign aid for 90 days, merging USAID into the State Department and placing thousands of staff on leave. This move, cheered by some African leaders tired of aid dependency, nonetheless disrupts health, education and development programs, leaving millions vulnerable. Trump's trade not aid mantra prioritizes US investment over humanitarian support. But the terms are clear. Africa must bend to America's will or face economic isolation. Here is what Africans are saying about these policies from the USA on social media. If you are from Africa and you are planning to come to the US on a B1, B2 visitor's visa, I need you to listen to this message. Trump is actually proposing to pass a bill to require to every African to pay $15,000 as a bond before they get a visa to come to the US. I need to listen again. Trump is proposing the House of Representatives, the Senate, to pass a law to require every African who's trying to come to the US on a visitor's visa, B1, B2 visitor's visa, I respect, to pay an upfront bond so they can get a visa to come and visit the US. Meaning, if you get a visa, your visa is going to be only good for 3 months. No more 6 months visa. When they issue you a visa, you have to pay $15,000 to the US Embassy. Not how. After you pay them money, they'll give you a visa so you can come to visit the US for 3 months. And if you overstay your visa, you will never get your money back. But here's the truth. If you make a mistake and pay the $15,000, the way we know Trump, that money's gone. Seriously, you never get your money back. Because they don't say, how will they pay you back? The question is, are they going to take your bank account, your banking information? Nothing. They don't have any plan how they're going to give your money back. Not too long, about 2 weeks ago, they say you're only going to pay about $250. But Trump said that $250 is too small. There is no way they can give you a visa to come to heaven, America. Oh, for $250, you ought to come to heaven. Meaning, America, you have to pay $15,000 to come and visit US. And this just happened almost 2 weeks after African presidents came to visit Trump in the White House. It doesn't make no sense. What type of diplomacy? After you visit to the US, Trump still come up and say, African tourists should pay $15,000 to visit the US. It doesn't make no sense. This does not apply to Australian. This does not apply to European. This does not apply to South American, nor to Asian. They are basically targeting Africa. They don't want African ever to come to the US. And all I can say to my African people, don't pay nothing and don't even apply for visa. US is not heaven. Donald Trump just slapped tariffs on every African country, including South Africa. This man just did what no African leader has had the guts to do: cut our economic dependency on America. Trump's tariffs are the best thing that has happened to South Africa in decades. You think a 30% tax is punishment? It's actually a blessing in disguise. This is exactly what we needed. For decades, South Africa's economic policy has been obsessed with Western validation, prioritizing export strategies that serve American supply chains, and treated the US like a parent we needed to impress. The African Growth and Opportunity Act gave us a seat at their table, as long as we just behaved. Well, that seat has just been pulled away, and this is good news, because now we finally have no choice but to build our own table. South Africa isn't just another African country, it's the continent's most industrialized economy. South Africa is Africa's superpower. It's time we start acting like it, and that means we have a responsibility to ourselves and the continent to lead. Trump's tariffs are a wake-up call. Instead of crying about losing access to US markets, why aren't you focusing on African trade? Why are we begging for scraps from America? The African Union is a nice idea on paper. 55 countries signed up, but there was no urgency, no pressure to take it seriously. Trump has forced us to take action instead of shipping our products to the US. Why aren't you exporting them to Egypt, Uganda, or Kenya? We don't need America. We need each other. Less America means more Africa. Trump wanted to punish Africa, but all he's done is accelerate African unity. Let's get rid of our victim mentality. It's tempting to cry and accuse the US of betraying us, but Africa's economic future should have never been tied to Washington in the first place. Instead, we should be thanking President Trump. He reminded us of something powerful. Nobody's coming to save us. We have to save ourselves. And if we do it right, if we get serious about the African Union, we might look back and realize that Trump's tariffs didn't punish us. They gave us freedom. Breaking news. Guys, Donald Trump is really teaching African leaders many lessons. Take a look at this. Trump slams $15,000 for US visa applications for Nigerians. This means before you can travel to United States, you must count down $15,000 for US visa. Take a look at this. This means if you're in Nigeria, you must count to 17 million before you can travel to US, and they can easily deny you visa, which means if they deny you their own visa, you will repeat the process again. It will come down another $15,000. This is how they are making money here in Africa. They will deny you visa and they will not refund you the money. Right now they have increased the money to $15,000, about 24 million naira. Here in Nigeria, just to travel to United States, you can see the way Donald Trump is frustrating African leaders, trying to teach them lessons, but they are not learning. The same Donald Trump just finalized a deal to deport migrants that have been living in US prisons. Instead of sending them to their countries like Mexico and Venezuela, their leaders over there rejected them, those criminals. But Donald Trump finalized the deal to send them to Africa. The same Africa Donald Trump is teaching this lesson. African leaders are still accepting criminals from Donald Trump. What happens if US build more prisons or force their leaders to accept them back? You can see that Donald Trump is frustrating and teaching African leaders lesson, and they are not learning. All of them are busy looting, crying, honest and lecture how to read, how to manipulate, how to still be in power here in Africa, whereas Donald Trump is frustrating Africans. Trump's policies are not just an assault on Africa's people, they are a mirror reflecting the failures of our continent's leadership. For too long, many African leaders have clung to Western aid, trade preferences, and validation, mortgaging our sovereignty for crumbs. The $15,000 visa bond is a humiliating reminder that the West views Africa as a liability, not a partner. Leaders who rely on USAID or AGOA to prop up their economies have been caught flat-footed, scrambling to respond to Trump's aggressive posturing. The dismantling of USAID, while disruptive, exposes the folly of dependency. As Ghana's President Nana Akufo-Addo once envisioned with his Ghana Beyond Aid strategy, Africa must prioritize self-reliance over handouts. Botswana's success in leveraging its diamond industry for growth is a model, yet too few leaders have followed suit. Trump's tariffs and visa restrictions are a slap in the face to leaders who cozy up to the West while neglecting intra-African trade and integration. The African Continental Free Trade Area, AfCFTA, launched in 2019, remains underutilized, with intra-African trade accounting for just 15% of the continent's total trade. Our leaders' obsession with Western markets has left us vulnerable to Trump's whims. When the US imposes tariffs or visa bonds, it exploits our fragmented economies and weak diplomatic clout. The African Union's tepid response, a call for constructive dialogue, is emblematic of this weakness, lacking the teeth to challenge Trump's aggression. Yet, not all African leaders are unprepared. Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso, leading the alliance of Sahel states alongside Mali and Niger, has rejected Western dominance, forging ties with Russia and prioritizing national sovereignty. Traoré's government, born of a 2022 coup, has invested in local agriculture and security, reducing reliance on foreign aid. When Trump's travel bans targeted Burkina Faso, Traoré's response was defiance, not deference. His leadership, rooted in Pan-African ideals, contrasts sharply with leaders who rush to congratulate Trump, hoping for scraps from his table. Nigeria's Bola Tinubu and Kenya's William Ruto, who praised Trump's re-election, must learn from Traoré's example. Dignity cannot be bought with sycophancy. The $15,000 visa bond for Malawi and Zambia is not just a policy, it's a symbol of Africa's marginalization. For the average Malawian or Zambian, $15,000 is an unattainable sum equivalent to decades of income. Even if refunded upon compliance, the bond creates a financial barrier that excludes all but the elite, effectively banning ordinary Africans from lawful travel. This policy, set to begin August 20, 2025, is a pilot program, but the US has warned that other African nations could soon face similar bonds. Haiti, Myanmar and Yemen, with high overstay rates, are also in the crosshairs, but Africa's disproportionate targeting, 26 of 36 countries in the proposed ban list are African, reveals a clear bias. This policy exploits Africa's fragmented borders and weak passport systems. Unlike the Schengen area, where a single visa grants access to 27 European countries, Africa's 54 nations operate 54 separate visa regimes, making travel within the continent cumbersome and costly. The African Union's single African passport, proposed in 2016, remains a pipe dream, hindered by bureaucratic inertia and national rivalries. If Africa had one visa, backed by a unified immigration system, Trump's ability to single out nations like Malawi and Zambia would be diminished. A united Africa could negotiate as a bloc, leveraging its 1.4 billion people and vast resources to demand respect. Instead, our porous borders and disjointed policies make us easy prey for coercive tactics. If Trump's current trajectory continues, a total visa ban on Africa is not a question of if, but when. The proposed expansion to 26 African countries, covering over half the continent, is a step toward blanket exclusion. By August 2025, nations failing to submit corrective action plans for deportation cooperation or vetting could face full bans. Somalia's ambassador, Dahir Hassan, has called for dialogue, but Trump's track record suggests he prefers ultimatums to negotiation. The US has already paused visa applications from Zimbabwe, citing deficient documentation, and similar pretexts could be used to target others. This threat is not just about travel, it's about Africa's place in the world. A continent barred from the US would face economic and diplomatic isolation, with reduced remittances, trade, and cultural exchange. African students, professionals, and tourists would be cut off from opportunities, reinforcing stereotypes of Africa as a problem region. Trump's policies, from tariffs to aid cuts, aim to coerce compliance, forcing African nations to choose between sovereignty and survival. The message is clear: align with US interests or be cast aside. Africa's salvation lies in unity. The African Union, despite its symbolic gestures, has failed to articulate a cohesive response to Trump's aggression. A statement on June 5, 2025 called for consultative dialogue, but words alone won't deter a bully like Trump. The AU must move beyond rhetoric to action, accelerating the AfCFTA and implementing a single African passport. A unified visa system would strengthen intra-African mobility, reducing reliance on Western travel routes. Imagine an Africa where a citizen of Malawi can work in Nigeria or study in Kenya without visa hurdles. A continent that trades with itself, invests in itself and speaks with one voice. Our borders, drawn by colonial powers, are our Achilles heel. They fragment our economies, fuel conflicts, and make us vulnerable to external pressure. The AfCFTA, if fully implemented, could increase intra-African trade to 50% by 2030, creating jobs and reducing dependency on Western markets. Leaders like Traoré, who prioritize local development, show what's possible when Africa looks inward. The alliance of Sahel states, though controversial, has challenged Western hegemony by forging alternative partnerships. Other leaders must follow, rejecting the West's carrot-and-stick diplomacy. Trump's summit with 5 African leaders in July 2025 was a masterclass in divide and rule. By cherry-picking smaller nations, he sidestepped Africa's powerhouses, exploiting our lack of unity. Nigeria, South Africa, and Kenya must lead the charge for a united front, rallying the AU to negotiate as equals. The G20's recognition of the AU as a permanent member in 2023 was a step forward, but without unity, it's a hollow victory. As analyst Marithi Mutaiga noted, the question is not what Washington will do, but what is Africa's interest? We must define our terms, not dance to Trump's tune. Trump's policies are a bitter pill, but they're also a catalyst. The $15,000 visa bond, the travel bans, the tariffs, they all expose the fragility of Africa's position in a world that respects only strength. Our leaders must heed this wake-up call, shedding the complacency that has kept us tethered to Western whims. The humiliation of visa bonds and bans is a chance to rebuild, to invest in our youth, our resources, and our unity. Leaders like Traoré prove that defiance is possible. Others must rise to the challenge. Africa is not powerless. We hold vast reserves of gold, oil, manganese, and uranium, resources the US covets. We have a youthful population, a growing tech sector, and a cultural influence that spans the globe. But without unity, we are prey. A single African visa, a robust AfCFTA, and a united diplomatic stance could render Trump's sanctions toothless. Let's turn his disrespect into our renaissance, building an Africa that stands tall, not on its knees. As the sun sets on another day of Donald Trump's unrelenting assault on Africa's dignity, epitomized by the outrageous $15,000 visa bond imposed on Malawi and Zambia, the continent stands at a pivotal moment. This is not just a policy crisis, it's a moral and existential challenge that demands Africa reclaim its agency. Trump's actions, from visa bonds to tariffs and aid cuts, are a calculated attempt to marginalize our 1.4 billion people, to reduce us to beggars at the gates of his America First fortress. But in this moment of adversity lies an opportunity, not to plead, not to cower, but to rise with unyielding resolve. Africa's future hinges on our ability to transform humiliation into strength, to forge a path that honors our ancestors and secures our children's dreams. The $15,000 visa bond is a stark reminder of the West's view of Africa, a continent to be exploited, not respected. For Malawians and Zambians, this financial barrier is a deliberate exclusion, a message that their aspirations are unwelcome unless they pay a king's ransom. The broader threat of a continent-wide ban, with 26 African nations in Trump's crosshairs, looms like a storm cloud, promising economic isolation and diplomatic irrelevance. Yet, this is not the time for despair. Trump's policies, however harsh, are a mirror reflecting our potential to redefine our place in the world. We are not powerless. We are the custodians of vast resources, gold, oil, uranium, and a youthful, vibrant population that can reshape global narratives. This moment calls for a collective awakening. Our people must reject the narrative of inferiority that Trump's policies seek to entrench. From the bustling markets of Lagos to the classrooms of Addis Ababa, we must cultivate a fierce pride in our identity, our ingenuity, and our resilience. The diaspora, sending $96 billion home annually, must amplify its voice, not just in remittances but in advocacy, reminding the world of Africa's contributions. Our youth, the heartbeat of our continent, must harness technology and innovation to build economies that don't bow to Western whims. The spirit of Ubuntu, our shared humanity, must guide us to support one another, from the Sahel to the Cape, in defiance of external attempts to divide us. For Africa's leaders, the path forward is clear. They must act with courage and vision, not as fragmented voices but as stewards of a united continent. Trump's selective summits and coercive tariffs expose the weakness of our disunity. Leaders must counter this by forging a collective front that leverages our collective strength. The African Union must be more than a ceremonial body. It must become a fortress of solidarity, negotiating with the weight of 54 nations behind it. Leaders must prioritize policies that empower our people, from investing in education and infrastructure to fostering innovation hubs that rival Silicon Valley. They must champion heroes like Captain Ibrahim Traoré, whose defiance inspires a generation, and emulate nations like Botswana, which turn resources into prosperity. Trump's policies are a fire, but Africa is no dry grass to be consumed. We are a baobab, rooted deep and standing tall. Let this be the moment we shed the shackles of dependency, reject the humiliation of visa bonds, and declare our worth. Let us build an Africa that commands respect, not through begging, but through action, pride, and unity. The world is watching. Let's show them who we are.